downtown vacancy is above 25% in Calgary, Edmonton, and Winnipeg. Every Canadian city shares the same pattern, a quiet, hollowed-out core ringed by thriving suburban corridors. Most people chalk that up to consumer preference. The real explanation begins on January 1st, 1946, with a single federal agency and a mortgage guarantee that would quietly turn every Canadian city inside out. Walk down the main street of almost any mid-sized Canadian city at noon on a Tuesday. The sidewalks are mostly empty, storefronts are dark, and the primary sign of life is the occasional passing bus. But drive 10 minutes to the edge of town, and the environment changes completely. Cars crowd multi-lane arterials, strip malls hum with shoppers, and parking lots are packed. In European cities of the same size, this pattern is completely reversed. Life, commerce, and crowds naturally cluster in the historic center, while the fringes remain quiet. In Canada, the opposite happened. This is no accident. Across the country, communities share this layout because Canada did something unusual. We designed our cities inside out. The foundation for this inversion was laid in the final months of the Second World War. On March 24, 1944, economist C.A. Curtis delivered a report recommending a bold plan: build 1 million small, affordable homes on the agricultural edges of Canadian cities. To finance this, Curtis suggested copying the American Federal Housing Administration model of government-backed mortgage insurance. Parliament responded with the National Housing Act of 1944, and on January 1, 1946, the government launched the Central Mortgage and Housing Corporation, called CMHC, with $25 million in capital. That July, Reconstruction Minister C.D. Howe stood in the House of Commons and urged construction on the outskirts of cities to house returning veterans. CMHC's core tool was mortgage insurance, a public guarantee that absorbed risk for private lenders. The agency insured high loan-to-value mortgages of up to 80%, but only for new construction on undeveloped suburban land. Older downtown homes did not qualify. If a buyer wanted to purchase and repair an existing urban house, they faced massive down payments. Federal policy had made building on the edge cheap and easy, while leaving the city centre behind. Between 1950 and 1966, the Federal Provincial Urban Renewal Program actively cleared what officials labelled blighted slums. Using a 50-50 cost-sharing model and eminent domain, municipalities targeted older urban areas for wholesale demolition. In Halifax, the city razed the historic black neighbourhood of Africville, forcing 80 families from their land with no compensation. In Toronto, planners demolished the historic Cabbagetown neighbourhood to construct Regent Park, replacing organic, mixed-use street life with isolated public housing blocks. Ottawa saw Le Breton Flats and Lowertown completely cleared, leaving Le Breton vacant for 4 decades. In Vancouver, the 1957 redevelopment study designated the immigrant neighbourhood of Strathcona for destruction to make room for a freeway corridor, a plan halted only by fierce, women-led grassroots resistance. This top-down policy treated existing communities and historic building stock as mere obstacles. When the demolition ended, the mixed-use urban fabric was gone. These cleared sites rarely returned to active street life, instead becoming isolated towers, highway infrastructure, or vast surface parking lots. In the 1950s and the 1960s, Canadian municipalities imported a quiet regulatory tool from American zoning bylaws: mandatory parking minimums. These rules forced developers to provide a fixed number of off-street parking spaces for every apartment unit or square foot of commercial space they built. On expensive, tight downtown parcels, meeting these quotas was a financial trap. Building a single underground parking stall added $50,000 to $100,000 to construction costs. For a standard residential building, this requirement added millions to the budget, making dense infill projects impossible to finance. Faced with these costs, landowners found a simpler economic loophole. Operating a cleared lot as a surface parking lot required no construction, avoided parking penalties, and generated immediate, low-tax cash flow. The policy meant to accommodate cars ultimately guaranteed that the land stayed empty. In the 1960s and the 1970s, Canadian municipalities accelerated highway construction, launching massive infrastructure projects that physically carved up their inner cores. Rather than connecting neighborhoods, these concrete corridors sliced them apart. In Toronto, the concrete spans of the Gardiner Expressway formed a permanent barrier between the historic downtown and the waterfront. In Montreal, the sunken lanes of the Ville-Marie Expressway tore directly through the city centre, demolishing entire blocks of housing. Edmonton's crosstown corridor, linking with the Sherwood Park Freeway, carved a similar path of displacement through established communities. This era of road building demolished thousands of homes, severed the historic urban fabric, and prioritized vehicle speed over residential stability. Backed by joint federal and provincial funding, these projects fundamentally transformed the way people moved. Downtown was no longer a vibrant destination where people arrived to gather and live. Instead, it became a high-capacity bypass, a place designed for suburban commuters to drive through on their way somewhere else. In the 1960s, a new architectural form began redefining Canadian commerce: the regional shopping mall. These massive complexes shifted the country's retail anchors away from traditional main streets and directly onto suburban highway intersections. This retail migration culminated in 1981 with the opening of West Edmonton Mall, which for a period became the largest shopping centre on Earth. Downtown merchants struggled to compete with the sheer convenience of this suburban model. Malls offered climate-controlled corridors, predictable foot traffic, lower overhead, and acres of free asphalt parking. Independent shops and historic department stores on traditional streets could not match these structural advantages. As high-end retailers migrated to the edge, older commercial corridors faced a wave of sudden closures. The storefronts that remained were gradually replaced by lower rent uses, service offices, or empty windows. Commerce had abandoned the historic core, cementing the suburban edge as the undisputed destination for everyday Canadian life. Today, many mid-sized Canadian downtowns exist in a state of functional whiplash. During the day, they operate strictly as white-collar office districts. By afternoon, they become highly concentrated hubs for social services. At night, the very same streets transform into loud, isolated entertainment strips. These conflicting roles actively clash with residential life and disrupt small business stability. The physical consequence of this planning pattern is now measurable. In 2023, a Canadian Urban Institute study revealed that downtown vacancy rates had climbed above 25% in Calgary, Edmonton, and Winnipeg. Calgary's office vacancy alone reached 33% that year. This high vacancy is especially striking because Calgary's corporate growth model relied heavily on suburban expansion revenue to balance its books. For decades, municipal funding favoured new developments on the city's perimeter over dense central reinvestment. The empty towers of the modern core are the visible, expensive result of a policy that systematically built the city from the inside out. Canada spent 70 years systematically building its cities from the inside out. Now, a new era of urban repair is attempting to dismantle that legacy. Municipalities are launching expensive office-to-apartment conversions, investing in light rail lines, and stripping away restrictive zoning. In July 2025, Nanaimo City Council took the rare step of completely eliminating off-street parking mandates in its downtown core. But reversing decades of deliberate policy is a monumental task. A handful of zoning changes and transit lines cannot easily reshape a physical environment designed entirely around the automobile. Ultimately, these struggles raise a deeper conflict. Can a decade of reform truly repair cities built over generations? And who gets to decide which version of the Canadian city was the mistake? Our empty downtowns are not accidents of history. They are monuments to choices we made. Reversing 7 decades of deliberate planning will not happen overnight. The question is, do we have the courage to rebuild them from the inside out? Share your thoughts in the comments.